The cameras caught everything, the glare of studio lights bouncing off dress blues, the hush of a hangar full of U.S. troops in Japan, and a podium framed like a verdict. Trump walked out to applause that sounded practiced, not proud. He opened with the anthem notes of patriotism, valor, sacrifice, strength, but the melody bent fast. In minutes, the speech slid from unity to grievance, allies, soft, past administrations, weak, America, taken advantage of. The faces in the crowd didn't cheer, they tightened. A young airman stood ramrod straight, jaw locked. A lieutenant colonel stared at the floor like he could read the cracks for a better answer. The feed was live. The internet was listening. Before we dive deeper, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens next isn't just commentary, it's the moment a nation realizes the difference between applause and respect. Clips exploded across timelines, snapped phrases stripped of context, then reassembled with brutal clarity. It wasn't one line, it was the pattern, a commander-in-chief turning a bond of service address into a scoreboard for ego. By nightfall, the story had already fractured America's attention span, until a voice stitched it back together. Denzel Washington, at a quiet fundraising gala in Los Angeles, stepped to a mic meant for thank yous and gave a diagnosis instead. Strength without respect is just noise, he said. No theatrics. No hashtags. Just a line that detonated precisely because it didn't shout. The outrage wasn't abstract. Military families posted from base housing, "We teach our kids to respect the uniform, please respect it back." Veterans stitched their ribbons to comments like affidavits. Fact-checkers surfaced transcripts, diplomats parsed subtext. And hovering over it all, a single, stubborn question pressed into the country's conscience: when the cameras are on our troops, who are we performing for, the world, or one man's reflection? The answer would pull two lives onto the same stage, and neither would leave unchanged. By the next morning, the Tokyo sunrise was competing with a different kind of glare, the blue light of millions of screens replaying Trump's speech in slow motion. Every network cut the same clip, the awkward pause after his comment about loyalty, the visible discomfort on the soldiers' faces. The White House called it authentic. The Pentagon called it unhelpful. But the American people? They called it something else entirely: embarrassing. Then came Denzel. Not from a press podium or a campaign stage, but from a studio chair during a morning radio show in Los Angeles. The host asked casually what he thought of the speech, expecting a diplomatic shrug. Instead, Denzel leaned into the mic, eyes steady, voice calm but edged like steel. "That wasn't patriotism," he said. "That was theater. And when the man running the show forgets who it's for, that's when the curtain needs to come down." The clip hit social media like a shockwave. Within hours, hashtags like #DenzelSaidIt and #TokyoSpeech trended worldwide. Veterans reposted his words, journalists dissected his tone, and influencers quoted him as if he'd delivered a sermon. But Denzel wasn't chasing applause. He'd spoken from something deeper: disappointment. In Washington, advisors scrambled. Trump, watching from Air Force One, slammed his phone down after a headline flashed: "Denzel Washington calls out the president." Reportedly, he turned to his staff and growled, "Get me the full clip. I want to see exactly what he said." The divide grew sharper by the hour: a Hollywood icon versus the commander-in-chief, truth versus image, respect versus ego. And as America tuned in for round two, nobody realized the storm had only just begun. By the time the plane touched down at Andrews Air Force Base, Trump was seething. Reporters shouted questions across the tarmac, flashes bursting like gunfire. "Mr. President, any response to Denzel Washington's comments?" He didn't answer. But the look he gave, tight-lipped, nostrils flared, said enough. Within hours, the counterattack began. A late-night tweetstorm. Then another. Hollywood elites think they can lecture real Americans. Sad. Denzel Washington, great actor, terrible judge of patriotism. I'll take our soldiers' respect over fake applause from fake people. The tweets ricocheted through every newsroom in America. Cable hosts debated whether Denzel had crossed a line, while others claimed he'd said what millions were afraid to. News chirons screamed Denzel versus Trump, culture clash turns political firestorm. Denzel, meanwhile, stayed silent, for now. He was on set, filming a quiet courtroom scene for his latest movie, when an assistant whispered that the president had called him out by name. He nodded once, expression unreadable. So he took the bait, Denzel murmured. Good. Now maybe we can talk about what really matters. Behind the scenes, his team begged him to stay quiet. But Denzel knew silence had a cost. For years he'd watched truth bend under spectacle, and now, under the weight of global scrutiny, he saw a chance to straighten it, not with rage, but reason. That night, an unannounced appearance on a primetime news show changed everything. He sat under bright lights, the nation watching. The host asked if he regretted his earlier comments. Denzel leaned forward, his voice measured. You don't disrespect people who wear the flag just to make yourself look stronger. You honor them by being worthy of their respect. The studio went silent. On Twitter, even some of Trump's supporters paused mid-swipe. Something had shifted. This wasn't Hollywood versus Washington anymore. It was pride versus principle. By dawn, Denzel's clip had already gone viral, but not because it was loud. It was powerful because it was measured. It didn't shout, it stung. Pundits across networks couldn't stop replaying it. One anchor called it the calmest demolition of arrogance ever broadcast. Conservative radio hosts tried spinning it as Hollywood hypocrisy, but even they hesitated. Denzel wasn't your typical celebrity activist. He was respected, grounded, and his words carried moral weight. At the White House, aides huddled around screens like battlefield strategists. Trump paced, muttering about traitors in entertainment and disloyal media. When one aide timidly suggested ignoring the actor, Trump snapped. Ignore him? He's winning the headlines. Soon, a counter-campaign began. Online accounts released old interviews, trying to frame Denzel as anti-American. Edited videos flooded feeds, twisted quotes went viral, and bots amplified them at lightning speed. Yet the more they attacked, the stronger his message became. Americans, weary from chaos, heard clarity in Denzel's voice. Meanwhile, at a veterans' town hall in Atlanta, a retired Marine stood up and said what millions were thinking: that man spoke truth. You don't have to wear a uniform to understand honor. The crowd erupted in applause. The cultural tide had turned. Talk shows booked Denzel for follow-up appearances. Editorials called him the conscience America didn't know it needed. His calm defiance had ignited something deeper, a conversation about what leadership should look like when the cameras stop rolling. And as the headlines swirled, Trump's fury only deepened. He wanted the last word, and in typical fashion, he was ready to take the fight somewhere no one expected: live, on stage, face-to-face. The network promos were electric. Tonight, Trump responds to Denzel Washington, Live. America was glued to the screens, waiting for the inevitable collision. Trump entered the studio first, chin raised, red tie sharp as always, the confidence of a man used to commanding the spotlight. But this time, something in his expression betrayed unease. Moments later, Denzel walked in. No entourage, no theatrics. Just that calm stride, that grounded presence that made entire rooms shift. The two men shook hands, a brief, cold formality. Cameras zoomed in, and the moderator's voice trembled as she said, "Let's begin." From the first exchange, the tone was explosive. Trump accused Hollywood of corrupting America's values, claiming Denzel's comments were part of a smear campaign. Denzel didn't flinch. He waited, then answered with quiet precision. "You talk about values, Mr. President. But values aren't slogans. They're how you treat people when nobody's watching." The audience gasped. Trump's smirk faltered. He leaned into his mic, trying to regain control, throwing accusations, twisting words, but every deflection met a wall of calm resolve. Denzel didn't need to shout, his voice carried the weight of truth. Social media exploded mid-broadcast. Hashtags like hashtag Denzel vs. Trump and hashtag Truth on Air began trending worldwide. Memes, clips, and reaction videos flooded timelines. Even late-night hosts paused their scripts to cover the confrontation live. In that moment, it wasn't politics, it was raw humanity versus performative power. And America could feel the balance shifting. The studio lights burned bright, and the air was electric, thick with the kind of silence that only comes before something historic. Every sentence from Denzel felt deliberate, sculpted, and unshakable. "You can wear the flag," he said slowly, his eyes steady on Trump, "but that doesn't mean you understand what it stands for." Trump's face hardened. His jaw tensed. For years, he'd built his image on dominance, on being the loudest voice in any room. But tonight, he wasn't winning. Every time he tried to interrupt, the audience reacted, not with applause, but with disapproval. For the first time in years, the crowd wasn't his. And outside that studio, millions were watching. Across the country, people in diners, living rooms, and airports leaned closer to their screens. You could feel the collective heartbeat of a nation suspended in disbelief. Even those who once admired Trump found themselves questioning what they saw, not because Denzel attacked him, but because he exposed him. Behind the camera, producers whispered frantically as viewership shattered records. "We're at 10 million, no, 15, one gasped. This was more than a debate, it was a reckoning. Trump, desperate to regain control, turned to mockery. "You're just another Hollywood actor pretending to care," he spat. But Denzel didn't blink. "Maybe," he replied, voice calm as steel, "but at least I know the difference between performance and leadership." The audience erupted. The moderator tried to restore order, but it was too late. The internet was already ablaze, commentators were scrambling, and history was being written, not with anger, but with restraint. For the first time, Trump wasn't dictating the narrative. Denzel was. The debate ended, but the echoes refused to fade. Within minutes, the internet transformed into a war zone of opinions. Hashtags exploded, hashtag Denzel Truth, hashtag Trump Meltdown, hashtag Japan Speech Debacle. On YouTube, millions watched the clip of Trump's outburst in Japan next to Denzel's response, contrasting arrogance with integrity. Comment sections overflowed with disbelief. "How did this man ever lead?" and "Denzel just said what we were all thinking." News outlets ran non-stop coverage. CNN called it a defining cultural moment. Fox tried damage control, cutting segments and re-editing clips, but even their anchors looked uneasy. The morning shows couldn't get enough of it, they dissected every frame, every pause, every word Denzel spoke. Behind closed doors, Trump's team panicked. Poll numbers dipped overnight. Major donors began reassessing future commitments. One strategist muttered, "He's losing control of the narrative." For a man who thrived on dominating headlines, this was a nightmare. Meanwhile, Denzel stayed silent. No interviews, no tweets, just quiet reflection. That silence made it worse for Trump. Every time he tried to strike back on social media, his words looked smaller, pettier. America wasn't laughing with him anymore, they were watching him unravel. In one viral clip, a veteran was interviewed outside a diner in Ohio. He looked into the camera and said, "Trump embarrassed this country in Japan. Denzel reminded us what dignity looks like." That single sentence captured the nation's mood. Denzel hadn't just called out a speech, he'd exposed a pattern. And the more Trump ranted, the clearer it became, this wasn't about politics anymore. It was about character. By the next morning, the White House was in chaos. Aides rushed from office to office, phones rang off the hook, and Trump's social media team could barely keep up with the storm he unleashed overnight. His posts came every 10 minutes, fake actor Denzel Washington spreading lies, Hollywood scum trying to bring me down, they hate America. The tone was frantic, erratic, desperate. Even his loyal followers noticed the cracks. Cable networks broadcasted split screens. Trump's meltdown on one side, Denzel's composed silence on the other. It wasn't just a clash of personalities anymore, it was a study in contrast. One man screamed into the void, the other stood still and let the noise expose itself. At a press conference later that day, a journalist asked Trump if he regretted his remarks about Japan. He slammed the podium, shouting, "I did nothing wrong. I told the truth about our soldiers, heroes who love me." Cameras flashed, reporters gasped, and that single phrase, "heroes who love me," became a meme within minutes. Meanwhile, Denzel appeared at a charity event that same evening. No security detail, no press conference, just a quiet speech about unity and respect. "You can't serve the people," he said softly, "if you only care about yourself." The room erupted in applause. That one line made front-page headlines the next morning. Political analysts started calling it the turning point. Commentators debated if Denzel had accidentally become the moral compass of a fractured America. Even conservative voices began to question Trump's fitness to lead. When a Hollywood actor speaks more truth than a former president, one columnist wrote, "You know the script has flipped." The balance of power was shifting, not through elections or policies, but through exposure. And this time, it wasn't Denzel chasing the spotlight, it was the spotlight chasing him. The following week, a televised roundtable discussion was announced, America at a Crossroads. Denzel had been invited, though he initially declined. He wasn't a politician, and he had no interest in becoming one. But as the narrative spiraled, his silence became its own kind of statement. The public demanded clarity. So, reluctantly, he agreed. The broadcast opened with thunderous anticipation. Millions tuned in. Denzel sat across from seasoned journalists, and though his posture was calm, his presence filled the room. When the first question came, "Why did you respond to Trump's speech in Japan?" Denzel took a deep breath. "I didn't respond to him," he said evenly. "I responded to what he represented. A man who uses his platform to divide isn't leading, he's performing. And the cost of that performance is America's integrity." Those words struck like a hammer. Across the country, people nodded, argued, cried, but they listened. For the first time in a long while, someone was talking to them, not at them. Trump, of course, couldn't stay silent. He phoned into a conservative network minutes after Denzel's segment ended. His voice cracked with anger, "He's lying. That man's career is built on pretending. I built reality." The irony was immediate, and brutal. Every outlet ran that quote next to Denzel's face, calm and unwavering. One represented chaos, the other control. One spoke to ego, the other to principle. By the next day, the line between entertainment and politics blurred beyond recognition. Pundits, influencers, and even late-night hosts were calling it the debate that never needed a stage. Because in that single moment, America wasn't watching an actor and a politician, it was watching truth and ego collide live on screen. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that confrontation refused to die. What started as a reaction to a reckless speech in Japan had evolved into something deeper, a reckoning with what America had become. Denzel Washington's words lingered like a haunting refrain, "You can't serve the people if you only care about yourself." They were replayed in classrooms, quoted in op-eds, printed on protest signs. Meanwhile, Trump's empire was fracturing. His advisors leaked stories of internal turmoil, donors quietly backed away. In private circles, even longtime allies admitted the obvious, the magic was gone. What once seemed untouchable now looked fragile. Every tweet, every outburst only deepened the cracks. Denzel, on the other hand, became an unlikely symbol of accountability. He gave no campaign speeches, made no promises, but his presence began shaping the national mood. Universities invited him to speak on ethics and leadership. Community leaders cited his remarks as a moral compass in divided times. He wasn't chasing influence, he had earned it through restraint, honesty, and conviction. Then came the documentary, The Speech That Shook the World. It chronicled the fallout from Trump's Japan appearance and Denzel's response. Critics called it a modern parable about truth and power. It broke streaming records within hours. The film's final scene showed Denzel leaving a dimly lit studio, walking alone into the night. The narrator's voice said, "In an age of noise, silence can be the loudest act of courage." That line echoed across the internet, shared millions of times. By the time the credits rolled, it was clear, this wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about legacy, and how, in one extraordinary moment, an actor reminded a nation that integrity still matters. When a leader loses control of his own words, the world remembers the silence that follows. Trump's speech in Japan wasn't just a diplomatic blunder, it was a moment when arrogance met reality. The room went cold, the soldiers uneasy, the cameras froze. And then Denzel Washington spoke. Calm. Steady. Uncompromising. He didn't raise his voice, he raised the standard. He reminded America that leadership isn't about shouting, it's about standing firm when truth gets uncomfortable. That broadcast didn't just spark outrage, it reignited awareness. It reminded millions that integrity doesn't need applause, only courage. Because in a time of noise, the calmest voice often becomes the loudest truth.